Helldivers 2 is a multiplayer co-op third-person shooter developed by Arrowhead Studios and published by Sony. Usually I wouldn't mention this, but it will be important later. The game takes place in a dystopian, or utopian depending on your point of view, future where the human race are spread across the galaxy, fighting against a faction of giant bugs, a faction of murderous robots, and a faction of what I can only describe as space zombies. Your job as a hyper-elite commando with a whole command-style ship at your disposal is to drop onto contested planets and complete tasks to take back said planet from said factions using guns and selected upgrades from the ship called stratagems. So, a scenario might play out like this. You have been tasked to drop onto a hostile planet filled with enemy bugs and help launch a site-to-site nuclear strike to take out a giant nest. You must land, find the launch codes, activate the power station, and then go to the missile launch site, manually open the silo doors, and protect the missile while it launches. You must then locate an extraction point and call a small troop carrier ship to extract you back to your spaceship, all before your ship leaves orbit and leaves you stranded. For any fans of Deep Rock Galactic, this may sound familiar, as the gameplay follows a very similar loop. You must drop into a dangerous place in a team of 1 to 4, complete certain tasks with optional side missions, before being allowed to extract back to the game hub with your extracted loot. If you play Helldivers with bug enemies, even the enemies are somewhat similar. The backstory has a lot more in common with Starship Troopers, a tongue-in-cheek movie set in the same century where elite troops must fight against evil bugs set to wipe out humanity. The similarities are numerous, right down to the tongue-in-cheek "for democracy" and "I do my part" vibe. A great example of this are the sarcastic loading screen tips. For example, don't forget to take breaks. That is, if you want to be remembered as a coward. As a last resort, you can use melee attacks to fend off enemies. Remember, death is better than cowardice. And friendly fire isn't. You get the idea. If you are picking up what I was putting down, then you already understand 99% of the story of this game. There is no campaign to speak of, only the backstory and the gameplay loop I've just described. There are major and minor orders from Super Earth, which could also be described as weekly and daily missions. The weekly missions are always to take back an infested planet. This is a group effort with every other player, as every time someone completes an operation on a required planet, they will contribute a small percentage to the war effort on that planet. When the war effort reaches 100%, the planet is back under Super Earth's control, and the major order is considered completed. Every player, whether they took part or not, will receive the reward. The daily missions are more of a solo venture, and will require the player to complete an achievement-like task during the day. For example, kill 200 bugs with a specific gun, or extract with more than 15 samples in a single game. This will reward a player who completes their daily mission with more medals to spend on upgrades and cosmetics. The missions themselves add complexity by providing the player with a big list of stratagems they could use, but then only allowing them 4 per mission, and making the player choose before dropping in. This means how difficult a mission feels can have a lot to do with which stratagems are selected before the game even starts. The overall game adds complexity with upgrades and various currencies attained. There are quite a few. There are requisition slips, or R as they are known, which is basically just money, and is used to purchase new stratagems that can be used in missions. This is gained just by completing objectives on the battlefield. There are also samples, which must be found on the battlefield, and crucially, must be extracted with, in order to count towards the team's total. These can be used to upgrade the player's spaceship, which increases the effectiveness of certain stratagems. Then, there are medals, which are awarded at the end of missions for completing objectives, and can be found in chests during missions. These are spent in war bonds, which are basically DLC packs to unlock cosmetics, new guns, and occasionally a premium stratagem. These war bonds are unlocked using super credits, which is the only currency you can buy with real money, but you can also find them on the battlefield in chests, or you can occasionally buy them with medals inside already open war bonds. What I like about the war bonds and super credits is that it doesn't feel like someone who has paid real money to get them has an unfair advantage. The vast majority of the boons are cosmetic, and the ones that aren't, like the guns, can be easily singled out by a player and worked towards to unlock without spending a penny of real money. It doesn't really feel like a grind to unlock, and all you have to do is play the game, in really any way you want, and the currency will come to you naturally. I like the way the samples work too. There are 3 levels of samples: common green, rare orange, and super rare pink. On the low level missions, only a small number of green samples will spawn for you to find. As you go up in difficulty, more greens will spawn, and eventually a small number of oranges will spawn as well. As you go up further, more oranges will spawn until eventually a small number of pinks will spawn. You get the idea. You need these to upgrade your ship, so this encourages a player but crucially doesn't force them to play on the harder difficulties. It also encourages exploration to find the samples on the map during missions, and punishes death by samples being dropped by a player who was holding them. The samples can then be picked up again either by another player or by the same player when they respawn, so long as the enemy hasn't overrun the area. And this brings me to the single thing I think I like the most about Helldivers 2, which is that during a mission there are no personal goals. It is truly a team game. If someone finds 10 super credits, everyone in the game gets 10 super credits added to their total. The samples don't care who extracts with them, so long as someone does. So if I extract with 5 green samples and my teammate extracts with 6 green samples, all 4 players in the game will have 11 green samples added to their total at the conclusion of the mission. This minimizes the potential for a selfish teammate to ruin the mission for you, which I think is important because this is a game where friendly fire is deadly and cannot be turned off. This can feel a little frustrating at first, as it can take a little getting used to. But when you come to terms with the fact that team kills will occasionally happen, it's not too bad, and honestly adds kinda nicely to the overall vibe of the game. The stratagems are fun too. There is a good mix, from spawning in support weapons like rocket launchers, dropping turrets to mow down enemies, or ordering a powerful orbital strike from your spaceship directly onto the battlefield. Different enemy factions have different loadouts that work well for them. Trying out new stratagems and finding out how well they work against certain enemies is fun, as is having the perfect loadout for high-level missions. Honestly, I don't think I could say much bad about the balance of Helldivers 2 with a full squad. The only slight negative I can think of on this subject is that there is a certain amount of RNG regarding how many enemies spawn at a certain time, and what kind of enemies there are, which has caused me to experience a level 6 mission that was honestly significantly crazier and more fraught than a level 9 mission I had recently been on. The problem is though, if the RNG elements were removed, I wonder if it would make the game feel too formulaic. On balance, I think it's probably not enough of a problem to need a change. Where the balance of the game does fully fall down though, is in squads of less than 4. Though the game does scale the number of enemies that spawn according to the number of Helldivers on the field, the enemies themselves don't get any easier. This means that no matter which way you swing it, the game is harder with less team members. Though it is possible to solo a mission, because of the time limit inherent in every mission, it is really difficult. Though I have to give the game credit for being incredibly easy to find a group of randoms to join, not everyone likes picking up randoms, and this game really doesn't feel designed for solo play. Props to anyone with the skills to smash out missions on their own. Now it's time to talk about the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the bugs. Not the crawling kind that you have to kill in the game, the game-breaking kind, the glitches and issues. There are so many. From the amusing ones, like the commander on your ship only having his head spawn for a few seconds when you load onto your ship, before the rest of his body appears, to glitches that fully break the game. I have become stuck in the ground several times in my games. Note, I don't mean stuck in terrain, I mean actually stuck in the ground, unable to rejoin the proper game map. Sometimes this happens in a way that I can't even unalive my character, so I've had to ask my mate to come over and kill my character so I can continue to play. Keep in mind, this means any samples I had on me, or support weapons, are now probably lost under the game map forever. I've seen stratagems get stuck and be unusable for the remainder of the mission, which is a particular problem when that stuck stratagem is the resupply beacon. Without that, it's almost impossible to get more ammo on some maps. Bugs are not rare and often ruin the mood of a good mission. I'm not expecting perfection, but there are way too many glitches in Helldivers 2. I also feel like the overall gameplay loop gets repetitive quite fast. Though I myself am still enjoying playing this with friends on a regular basis, having already sunk 75 hours in, even with friends, I don't think the missions are varied enough to last an average player more than about 100 hours or so. Not bad value for money, but not everyone is as patient with video games as I am. What I'm trying to say is that there isn't a huge amount of variety from one mission to the next, and someone who gets bored easily will get bored very quickly with Helldivers 2. Finally, I have to say a few words on the quote-unquote controversy that surrounded this game. Sony, being Sony, insisted that in order to play Helldivers 2, you must have a Sony account. People balked at this. Why must I give my details to a company just so I can play a video game whose online service ultimately has very little to do with them? This has since been backpedaled on, and a Sony account is no longer required. If this was your only reason not to purchase Helldivers 2, I would advise you to reconsider. The game isn't worth a swerve on principle alone, and I don't feel like Arrowhead should be punished for the sins of their publisher. At the end of the day, if you have friends who will play this with you, I think Helldivers is an extremely competent and very fun experience, minus the bugs. But for someone who doesn't have people to play this with on the regular, I don't feel like there is enough to suck in and, more importantly, hold the attention of a player. Therefore, despite very solid gameplay and a very enjoyable multiplayer experience, unless you already have friends asking you to play this with them, I am unlikely to recommend Helldivers 2.